the morning of the fire, I was worried that it was going to come on in here, and Mark assured me that, there was a lot of stuff to burn between the fire and us, and I think everybody probably thought that. So we both went to work, and then I was really nervous. I was in Prairie City, and the gal I was working for said, just head on home. It was about 20 to 12, and that was in Prairie City, so I started to head home, and I got as far as Halls Hill, which is maybe halfway, and our daughter called on my cell, and she said, Mom, they're evacuating Miller Mountain Road, and that's a mile towards town from us. And I said, okay, I'm on my way. And so I really sped up and got into the south end of Canyon City, and they had a roadblock, and the policeman there said, I need a mile marker. I can't let you through unless you give me a mile marker. I'm not letting anybody through past 6 miles. And I told him that I needed to go to 4.5, and so he said, you'd have to hurry. So we lived.
We're actually up
7.
way past 6.
So I just gunned it, and I went as fast as I could and tore up Cougar Crossing Road about 50 miles an hour in our van, and stopped at the gate and opened it, threw the dogs in the van, pulled up here, ran in the house, and the phone was ringing. And it was our daughter again, who lives in Seneca. She asked if anybody was up here with me, and I said no. And she had been trying to find someone with a horse trailer to come and get our horses, and she couldn't find anyone. And she said, are you okay? And I said, well, I'm scared. I can hear the fire, and I can see the fire because it was coming up that ridge up there. And she said, just get out. And I said, no, I have to load the horses. And the last thing I said to her was, I have to load the horses. And she was screaming at me to just leave. And then there was a policeman knocking on our front door, and I opened it, and he said, you have to leave. You have 4 minutes to get out of here. And I said, I have to load the horses. And he said, no, you don't have time. You have to leave. And I said, I'm going to go get the horses. And he said, just open the gates. So I ran down and opened both gates, and they were just standing there when I left. And
that's a quarter, or eighth of a mile down there.
And so I ran down there and told him goodbye. And finally we all got in our rigs, and the van had a flat because I had driven up so fast. So everybody got out and threw the dogs and everything they'd thrown in the van into this little Jimmy that it had been sitting here a few months. And I was just praying that it would start, and it did. It started. So then his folks came down first, and as I followed them, and the boys were behind me in their rig, but I left the horses, and I asked God to stand with them, and he did. He did, because they survived.
They were fine.
They were so good. And we've lost everything, but it doesn't matter because we have us and horses and the dogs. And we got down to town. The fire, Dad said he was watching the fire, and it beat us to town. It was sparking all the way, and we were going as fast as we could back into Canyon. And he got there almost 10 minutes after we did from Long Creek. And
I straightened the corners out quite a little bit. It was the last I heard from her, and I spoke with my dad, was we got to go. Here comes the fire, and they could. I guess it was deafening. They could hear it. And
Mindy could hear it.
They piled in the rigs and flew down the hill, and that was the last communication I had with them. When I got to, there's a big gap between Long Creek where I was working until I have service again. And so I left, and man, it was a long time before I was able to call. And when I finally did, I finally could get service. I tried calling. I couldn't raise anybody. And boy, that was probably the most awful, several minutes or half hour or whatever of my life. It's a good hour from Long Creek to here, and I kept trying, and eventually I did. I caught them when they'd gotten to my folks' place. So
Or
that
daughter.
was, boy, you can't imagine things that go through your mind. It's pretty rough. We put everything, all our lives into this place, and yeah, it's kind of sickening. But I expected to find the horses gone, or piled up dead. And I thought up here in the northwest corner is probably where they'd have run to and finally got trapped and died. And I looked around; there wasn't any tracks to support that in the ash or anything. I didn't see any horse tracks. So my son-in-law was still looking around here, and I went. My dad hadn't gotten here yet. I went down to the meadow and was looking around, and I called for them, and generally they come right away, and nothing. So I went down there and expected maybe they didn't even get out of the meadow, but gosh, and it was so thick with smoke you couldn't see very far. The smoke was still hanging pretty heavy, and hot spots everywhere, and there they stood down there, and I'd been able to irrigate that meadow just with the overflow from what our house uses from the spring, and I had piped it down there, and this is a hot, dry part of the summer, and I'd been able to keep it green enough, and they stayed right in that little island of green, maybe I don't know, half an acre or a quarter of an acre, and that's where they were standing. They wouldn't move, until I walked up to them, and we had to rustle up some string or something to. All the halters and everything had burned up, obviously. So, but they were more than willing to leave with us.